I'm not as young as I used to be, which means I can't treat my body the way I once did. In fact, last year's medical checkup didn't turn out the best, so I decided I needed to change things up and start eating healthier. One of the ways I do that is by making smoothies. But smoothie shop prices can be pretty high, and making them at home always seem like a pain. You gotta pull the blender out, find the right attachments, set everything up, and then cleaning everything is annoying, making it difficult to quickly whip up a breakfast smoothie in the morning. That's why I'm glad to tell you about the BlendJet 2 portable blender. Like I said, it's portable, so you can blend up a smoothie at work, a protein shake at the gym, or even a margarita on the beach. It's small enough to fit in a cup holder, but powerful enough to blast through tough ingredients like ice and frozen fruit with ease. BlendJet 2 is whisper quiet, so you can make your morning smoothie without waking up the whole house. That's especially important to me because I wake up before the rest of my family, and once my kids are up, my morning work routine is pretty much shot to hell. And best of all, BlendJet 2 cleans itself. Just blend water with a drop of soap and you're good to go. BlendJet 2 has over 30 plus colors and patterns to choose from, so if you don't like one design, there's definitely one that suits your personality. So what are you waiting for? Go to blendjet.com and grab yours today. Be sure to use my promo code SuperCinemaPod12 to get 12% off your order and free 2-day shipping. No other portable blender on the market comes close to the quality, power, and innovation of the BlendJet 2. They guarantee you'll love it or your money back. Blend anytime, anywhere with the BlendJet 2 portable blender. Go to blendjet.com and use my code SuperCinemaPod12. That's SuperCinemaPod and the numbers 12 to get 12% off your order and free 2-day shipping. Shop today and get the best deal ever.
Morning.
It's really hard for me to play with myself in this thing.
That's a shame. Look, you want to play, I'll play. And I'll win.
No, not if it's Monopoly, because I really kick ass at that game. But I get to be the shoe.
I'm going to ask you just one more time. Do you want to work for water and power?
Oh, yeah, that sounds groovy. I get to wear a cute little outfit like yours.
Welcome to the Superhero Cinephiles podcast. I'm your host, Perry Constantine, and welcoming today a new guest, but a fellow podcaster and a fellow superhero podcaster, no less, and that is Ashley Thomas. Ashley, how you doing today?
Hey, good. Thanks, Perry. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Like we were saying off mic, I almost forgot to watch this movie, but luckily I remembered before it got too late.
Yeah. I'm glad. Otherwise, that'd be a late night for me.
Yeah, and it would definitely be an interesting show if we had to do it without me having watched the movie. So we're going to be talking about Tank Girl, which we'll get into later. But before we start talking about that, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So, as you said, I am a fellow podcaster. I am one of the hosts of Podcast 616, which is podcast-616 on the We Made This podcast network, which is a Marvel Universe podcast. So we are mainly talking MCU stuff, but we also talk comics, Marvel adjacent things. Like we just had a couple guests on to talk about Marvel cosplay a few weeks ago, which was a lot of fun. We also have been known to do some comics episodes, which I am a big fan of because I've been reading comics since I could read. So, which is most of my life. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. I've only started listening to it recently. I just listened to your Guardians episode and really dug that. A lot of similar thoughts about it. And I'm glad that you guys touch on the comic stuff too, because usually with a lot of podcasts, you get a lot of people who are maybe focused on one or the other. or sometimes with some of the comics book podcasts, maybe they're not as interested in the movie. So it was nice to see listen to someone who has a little bit coming from kind of the same angle that I do, where it's you like the comics, but you also accept that the movies are kind of their own thing too. So that
Right.
was fun to listen to.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.
But before we let's talk a little bit about how you got started with Podcast 616.
Yeah, so I guess it was in late 2020, maybe, or maybe late 2021. I don't remember which. Uh, I was brought in through a friend of mine from grad school. I am a graduate of Signum University, which is a cool place to get a master's degree in literature. But you can also focus in different concentration areas, and mine's in imaginative lit, which is effectively a master's in science fiction and fantasy. Um, so, uh, my
Geez, I wish
husband
my
calls
master's program offered that.
I know, right? You can also get a master's in things like Tolkien studies and linguistics, and it's a pretty cool place. So check it out if you're into that sort of thing. But anyway, my husband calls it I have a master's in nerd, and so anyway, one of my grad school buddies, he had done a little bit of podcasting with the We Made This podcast network, and they had just started a Marvel podcast a few months previous. They were looking at bringing in more women to talk specifically about the upcoming Miss Marvel TV series. And he tagged me in a tweet and said, "Hey, Ashley podcasts. Uh, why don't you talk to her?" And I'm like, "Oh, okay. So tell me more." And I was brought in to the network, and um, at that point, like, the Miss Marvel show had gotten delayed, but turns out We Made This does a lot of podcasts about a lot of different things. So, which happen to be areas of interest of mine, like Star Trek and film. The very first episode I got to record for the We Made This podcast network wasn't actually for Podcast 616. It was for their current film podcast called Real Talk, and I got to talk about Candyman, the new one, which was fantastic, and I love it so much. Big horror fan. So anyway, that was how I got started podcasting with them. And eventually, at the time, Podcast 616 did not have like a regular host. It was rotating hosts, basically who within the network was interested in whatever MCU thing was coming up next. And then people would rotate out and have guests or whatever. And so the podcast kind of was struggling, I think, due to the lack of consistency. And so um, our network chief, Tony Black, was like, "Hey, we either need to get some folks in here to run this steadily, or we're going to need to drop it, just because it's not doing what it should for a Marvel podcast." And so Hugh McStay, who is my co-host, he and I both said, "Hey, we would be interested in hosting, but we neither of us can do it on our own." So we teamed up together. We formed our own. I mean, to use a DC term, we formed a dynamic duo, um, and started hosting Podcast 616 together in earnest last summer. Summer of 2022. And it's definitely thrived a lot under our new management, which has been great. So you will always hear at least one of us, but most of the time you'll hear both of us on a show. And we have a series of guests come in. We'll do news roundups, talk about MCU stuff. We'll talk about comics. We'll talk, whenever there's a new movie. Of course, just today we recorded our Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 episode. So if I don't know when this one will air, but you can go check that out if you've seen it. Definitely get into spoiler territory if you've not. So tread with caution. But anyway, so we cover the movies, we cover the shows, and give you all the Marvel news you can use. Usually about once a month. So
Awesome, very cool. Yeah, like I said, I listened to the first episode. I'd actually been talking with Hugh before actually you and I started talking about him
Mm.
coming on. So,
Oh,
although
lovely.
so we got him coming on. It was tough because he's in the UK, I'm in Japan, so the schedules are a little bit less compatible than
Right.
than like with someone in the US. So yeah, we finally able to work it out. So we're gonna have him coming on. We're recording this at the beginning of May. Hugh's coming on in June to talk about Doctor Strange.
Oh,
But you know
fun.
these, yes, I'm looking forward to that because we've covered the Multiverse of Madness, and we've covered actually the original Doctor Strange movie, which most
Right.
people probably didn't even know existed.
Oh no, I
Uh,
know that
yeah,
exists.
it was actually I actually enjoyed it quite a bit. I was actually surprised by how much I kind of dug it.
Awesome.
But
Yeah, it's on my to watch list. I've been having a hard time tracking it down. So
yeah, you may have to go through, some illicit
Sec-
means to procure it.
well, I know Shout Factory over here did a really great Blu-ray release a couple years ago, and it's unfortunately out of print. So
Yeah,
I'm probably just gonna have to go through the secondary market to get a copy.
yeah,
But that's okay. It's okay. I
yeah,
can find
yeah. I had to find other means to procure it here in Japan.
it. Yeah. That's tough.
Yeah, it's one of my big things that I talk about a lot on the comic book show and also on other podcasts. Just like I wish they would keep more of the stuff in print. It's just annoying when that happens.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but anyway, that's a rant for another time. But
Right.
so, how did you get into superhero stuff?
Oh gosh, I remember being about 6 years old, and where I grew up, I I'm you're in Japan. I'm from the States as well. I know you are too,
Mhm.
but I am from a little tiny town in East Tennessee, where it takes about 10 years, 5 to 10 years for culture to hit my tiny town from the rest of the world. So. Uh, I remember when I was a kid going to the grocery store with my mom, and I would go and look at like the magazine rack, and they happened to have comic books. And I remember thinking, well, that looks kind of interesting. And I was drawn to the art. I already kind of had a proclivity for superheroes because I was a fan of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Uh,
Mhm.
but the comics were really what sent me over the edge with superheroes. So I asked my mom, I was like, "Hey, can I get a comic book?" And she's like, "Yeah, sure." And at the time, I found these comic book bags. They were 3 comics for $1, so they were all like back issues from like the '80s or whatever that somebody had put together to quite literally make a buck.
Mhm.
I could get 1 comic for about $1 at that time, or I could get 3 comics for $1. And I was like, oh, let's get 3.
Mhm.
And so I would go through the bags of 3 for $1 comics that they had there. You could see what was on either side for 2 of them, and then whatever was in the middle was a surprise. So I would check all of them out, pick one that looked interesting to me, and uh, you know that was better than me asking for like a candy bar or something at the grocery checkout, because comics aren't going to rot my teeth. So there we
Right.
go.
Might rot your
So
brains, but that's
yeah, it might rot my brain, not my teeth though. So we good there. It's a it's a little more expensive to get the teeth fixed, right?
Mhm.
Theoretically. So I started reading comics, and I just became enamored with superheroes and superhero stories. But one of the first comics that really, really got my attention was the 1984 run of Marvel Superhero Secret Wars. I happened to
Yeah.
get issue number 2 in one of those 3 for $1 comic bags, and that just introduced me to all these different Marvel heroes, and I was enamored. So from there, it was kind of like, oh, we got her, we got her, she's hooked. So several long boxes later, and um, watching all of this was the early '90s, so I'm in like the heyday of the Marvel X-Men cartoon.
Mhm.
Spider-Man 1994 is the main reason I love Spider-Man. Um, yeah, just so many different superhero things just got in my DNA at a very early age. So uh, I kind of jokingly say, because I just in general, I feel very strongly about justice and how um, governments should take care of their people, and if I see something that I feel is unjust in the world, I point it out and say, no, no, we're not going to do that. um I kind of jokingly say blame the comic books, but really blame the comic books because that was where I really got that kind of principle instilled in me,
No,
was reading
I
comics.
I had very much the same thing, right? Because
Yeah.
it's funny. I grew up in a very conservative-minded family politically, and my grandfather thought Reagan was the greatest president of all time, that kind of thing. And I ended up becoming like the most progressive, like democratic socialist, very progressive, and we're to the point where I think I'm disappointed that Joe Biden isn't more progressive, type of thing. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm like the complete opposite of my family, and a big part of that was because of comic books, because of
Yeah.
especially like X-Men stuff. And now this is going to sound weird. So you said you came from a small town in East Tennessee. Um, what was the name of that town? Because my brother used to live in a small town in East Tennessee.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
So it's spelled Maryville, but if you're from there, nobody says it that way. It's Maryville. It's
Okay.
outside of it's outside of Knoxville.
Okay. My brother was in a small town called Hampton, I think. It was like in a outside Elizabethton or something like that.
Oh, okay. Elizabethton's about an hour and a half north.
Okay, yeah. I heard small town in East Tennessee. I'm just like, no, that'd be
Yeah,
too weird.
yeah. No, I've been to Elizabethton. I think I've heard of Hampton, but I've never been there. I don't think.
There's not much there. It's just like you drive through really quickly.
Yeah. Yep.
It's just like a small mountain town up there. Anyway, so today we're going to be talking. Well, before we jump into Tank Girl, is there anything you're interested in these days? Anything that's kind of grabbing your interest, comics wise, movie wise? Anything that's not necessarily specifically for the podcast?
Sure. Yeah. Uh, I mean, not for the podcast, but obviously very interested in MCU happenings. My current pull list at my comic book store is actually very much like the only two Marvel titles I've got on there right now. Actually, no, excuse me. I have three Marvel titles. I'm reading the current She-Hulk series by Rainbow Rowell, which is fantastic. Everybody should read it. Great art by a local artist. He does the colors over here, Rico Renzi. And I say local to me. He lives in my town, so that's pretty cool.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. He does the colors, and then Jen Bartel is doing the art for the book. It's all really good. I'm also been reading, I'm about a year behind. I keep it in my pull list because it's based on my favorite movie, but I've not gotten to stay up with it. Is Alien? Marvel's had a couple different. I don't know if they're different, but a couple new volumes of Alien.
Right.
But those have all been fantastic, and I love the artwork in those so much that I have requested specifically, may I please have all the variant covers that you all get? So I get like 4 or 5 different copies of the same issue, but I'm just enamored with all of the artwork for that. So if you're a horror fan, if you're an Alien fan, that's a book that's really worth picking up. So give that a look. And I've also got Avengers on my pull list. So
Okay.
um,
Yeah, I'm all trades now, so I usually
mm,
only get them when they come on sale, especially because when I started getting into comicsology a few years back, I started getting into single issues again and getting them all digitally. But it's just man, there's just so much stuff, so much good stuff out
yeah,
there, and
yeah,
it
yeah.
it, it was so hard for me to keep up because I read like 10 issues a month or something, and then I'd get to a new issue, and I'm just like, fuck, what happened before? I can't remember.
Well, the other. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So now I just get trades now. It's just easier
Mhm.
on my wallet and easier on my memory.
No, fair. The other stuff I'm reading right now, I'm reading. There are tons of different Star Trek titles right now from IDW, and those are fantastic. I am also one of 4 hosts on the We Are Starfleet podcast, uh, which covers varying different Star Trek series, the current ones. So that's pretty fun. And the comics for that have been excellent. I've been really impressed with every title I've read. Uh, I also have been reading the new Gargoyles series. I don't know if you ever watched the Gargoyles animated series back in the
I did
90s.
not. I missed the boat
Yeah.
on that.
Ah,
Because I think that was it was a Disney Afternoon thing, if I'm not mistaken.
it was
And
in fact a Disney Afternoon thing. Yeah.
yeah, and it came on, I think, right after I, in my mind, grew out of the Disney Afternoon. And
Mm.
even though now I know in hindsight that it is much more mature than a lot of those shows were.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but yeah, I slept on that whole thing. It's one of those things that now that it's on Disney Plus and everything, I've been meaning to check it out, but just haven't gotten around to it yet.
Oh, I will tell you, Gargoyles is my all-time favorite animated series. It is at least 50% of the reason I have 2 English degrees. So it's very literary. It's very intelligent. I will argue that it is the best thing Disney has ever done. Full stop. Period.
Mhm.
End of line. The new comic series that is out right now, it's put out by Dynamite. It's actually being written by the showrunner for Gargoyles,
Oh,
Greg
cool.
Weisman. So he's
Mhm.
also the guy behind Young Justice, which I know a
Yeah,
lot of
that
folks like quite a bit, but I have personally have not watched. Anyway, Greg is brilliant and great storyteller. I'm really enjoying what he's doing with this book. So
I've fallen behind on the last season of Young Justice, but especially,
mhm.
man, those first 2 seasons were just amazing. Especially that first
Mm,
season, just amazing stuff.
mhm.
And I think he also did Spectacular Spider-Man, didn't he? Or
Yes,
my,
I was like,
okay,
there's one other comic series show that he
yeah,
did that was really good, and I was blanking on what it was, but yes,
God, that was
Spectacular
amazing.
Spider-Man.
Yeah, I mean,
It was in fact spectacular. I
yes,
need
yeah,
to go back and finish that because I started watching it uh I'm one of the 5 people on earth that still gets DVDs from Netflix, at least until they end that in September.
Mhm.
And so when I started watching it, I started watching it through DVDs through Netflix in like 2010 or 2011. And I've not gone back to it because there were only like 4 DVDs out at the time. So I know there's more episodes than that, but I loved it. It was very, very good.
Yeah, it's so good. Yeah, it's a total of like 24 episodes or something, like two
Hmm.
half seasons, basically.
Yeah.
Such a crime that it didn't last longer. But
Yeah, for
especially
real.
because it was funny because you mentioned the '94 Spider-Man series. That was really kind of like my big introduction to Spider-Man as well. But it
Hmm.
was I tried rewatching it when it came on Disney Plus, and it was comparing it in my mind to Spectacular Spider-Man. I'm just like, yeah, I know this one's got nostalgia and everything, but man, Spectacular Spider-Man's a lot better.
I like both, but it's
I
been a
like
while
both,
since
but
I've
yeah,
watched. Yeah, it's been a while since I've watched either one. So, and I kind of feel like they're more apples and oranges. But
yeah. The also when you read the stories about all the censorship behind the scenes on the '94 series, it's pretty
oh,
funny.
really? Oh,
Oh yeah,
okay.
yeah.
I
Like
hadn't
they
read
had
up on that.
because that was like in the post Power Rangers parent freak
Hmm.
out. So Fox Kids was like incredibly scared about offending parents. So like the sense and the creator, he used to go on to conventions and he used to go with like the notes that the network had given him, and he used to read them on stage. And it was stuff
Hmm.
like when Spider-Man lands on the rooftop, you have to make sure that there are no pigeons there that he could conceivably harm when he lands, or something like
Oh,
that.
good grief!
You weren't able to show like punches connecting. You could never say that Uncle Ben died or was killed. It was always the burglar who got Uncle Ben. It's why Morbius drained plasma and through like these weird mouths on his
Yeah,
hand
yeah.
instead of draining blood, because you couldn't say he was draining blood. And apparently they thought that biting someone's neck and draining their blood was too scary for children. But I maintain that the little freaky clawed mouths on the hands was far creepier than draining blood through
Yeah,
the
I
mouth.
remember thinking like, "Ooh, that's a little." But yeah, and there was a whole thing in the '90s where it didn't matter what cartoon you couldn't say you killed or you were going to kill something or kill
Yeah,
someone.
yeah.
Like you could not even say the word.
Oh
So.
yeah. It's funny because I just did a guest spot on my buddy's Power Rangers podcast, Summoning the Zords, and
Mm.
we talked about the comparing it to the Super Sentai series that it was based on. And one of the things in that, it's like they're constantly talking about death and putting kids in peril, and I'm just like, you never saw that shit in the Power Rangers show, because parents were freaking out enough, but if they had mentioned the possibility of characters dying, they would have had they would have pulled out the
Hmm.
pitchforks.
Hmm. Hmm.
But anyway, all that's pretty nice preamble to get into talking about Tank Girl.
Yeah.
So I remember seeing ads for this, like talking about comic books. I remember reading comic books in the 90s and always seeing like these 1-page ads for this movie. But I never watched it until you brought it up. I was actually kind of surprised I was able to find it in Japan, but luckily my video store had it. What is your history with this movie? Why did you decide to pick this of all the superhero movies to come and talk about?
Well, after looking through your extensive list of what you have covered, I'm like, I don't know that there are any superhero movies I can name that you haven't already covered on the show. So I had Tank Girl on my radar for a little while. I have made it a habit, since I was a teenager and superhero movies really became a thing at that point, to go and watch. And if it was based on a comic book, I want to watch it. Mm-hmm. So I've had this pretty long, extensive mental list. And while I was maybe about 10 when Tank Girl came out, and so I missed it. Also, there is no way my mother would have ever let me watch Tank Girl, full stop. Definitely would not have gotten in the video rental card or anything as a kid. But I'd heard about it and I knew it was based on a comic, and I've never read a Tank Girl comic, but I was like, okay, I know the character is kind of iconic in some circles. She's very much considered like a powerful feminist type icon. So I'm like, okay, well, that sounds interesting to me. I'm a woman. I like that. That's cool. So I want to check her out. I am a contributor to the Sci-Fi 5 podcast. So if you've not listened to it, you can listen to our full archive on your podcatcher on our website. But Sci-Fi 5 gives you 5 minutes of science fiction history 5 days a week. And I was assigned Tank Girl for March 30th of this year. So that was my first time watching the film, and I was expecting it to be a little edgy. And I kind of took a glance at the IMDb page, and it's a very divisive film. People either love it or hate it. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, we'll see how I feel. I am not put off by quote unquote bad movies. I tend to find enjoyment in them, or at least like I even if it doesn't work for me, I understand why I can understand why it would work for other people. So, but at any rate, this was literally part of my job to watch Tank Girl. So I watched Tank Girl, and I was shocked by how much I loved it from the moment the credits started rolling, or the intro title started rolling. You get this artwork, which is from the Tank Girl comic, and the song is "The Girl You Want" by Devo, and I'm like, oh, I love this song. This is a great song, and I was just hooked from like as soon as I pushed play. So that was how I started watching Tank Girls, and that was just a couple months ago. And after I finished it, I was like, I like that a lot more than I thought I would. So I was looking through your list. It's like, oh, Perry's not covered Tank Girl. Let's go with that, because I need to process this movie a little more. So I got to write the script for the podcast, which I sent to you. So I don't know if you want to include that in show notes or whatever.
Oh yeah, I'll make sure to include that. Unfortunately, I meant to listen to that, but like I was saying off mic, I completely forgot that we had this scheduled today, and then I'm like, oh crap, I forgot to listen to it, and I almost forgot to watch the movie.
No worries. It'll only take you 5 minutes, quite literally. So, but yeah, that was how I got started with Tank Girl. And then the more I read about the film and some of the folks in the cast, I just like, wow, this is like almost like lightning in a bottle, because you have a really great cast. You have folks that this was kind of a I Knew You When sort of deal. Like, this is a very young Naomi Watts as Jet Girl. Lori Petty is from Chattanooga, Tennessee, and so she sounds like me, which I'm like, very relatable. But my context for her was she was the whale trainer in Free Willy, and that is the only other thing I think I'd ever seen her in. So,
you never saw Superman the Animated Series?
Oh, that's right. She was in that, wasn't I?
She
And
was
I've only.
Livewire.
Okay, so no,
Yeah.
I am familiar with Superman the animated series, but I was more of a Batman girl.
Okay.
So I watched the heck out of Batman the animated series, and I think I've seen like the occasional episode of Superman the animated series, but not with Livewire. So
Okay. Yeah. So she did the voice of Livewire on that.
sweet.
And because I mostly know her, like I've seen her in some other stuff, but I mostly associate her with her voice because she's got such a distinct voice, and I know it
Yeah.
so much from Superman the animated series. So, so when I saw the cast, I'm just like, Lori Petty. I know that name from somewhere. I'm like, but I can't remember where. And then as soon as she starts speaking in the opening narration, I'm like, holy shit, it's Livewire. Oh, okay. And then I was looking up her filmography, and I saw she was in a bunch of other stuff that I'd seen. Like she was in the original Point Break. You're right. She was in Free Willy as well. Orange is the New Black.
Right.
But the thing that kind of surprised me, I completely forgot about was, and this is a show that there's this meme going around on Twitter lately about like, I'm the only person who watched this show. And for me, that show is Brimstone. I'm not sure if you know about this TV show.
No, I don't.
It was on Fox for about one season. It was like aired on Friday nights.
Was it a sci-fi show? Because that's the story with a lot of Fox.
It's like more of a fantasy show. So the story is that you've got this cop who he died and he went to hell, and then because he had killed because his wife had been raped and he killed his wife's rapist, and so then he dies. He goes to hell, and the devil gives him a job, and the devil says there are like 100 some souls that have escaped from hell. I want you to go back to Earth and find them for me and send them back. And if you do that, then I'll restore your life. I'll let you go back and live a life on Earth. And then he returns him to Earth like 5 years later or something like that. It was only one season. It was really cool. John Glover played the devil, and he was amazing. And it's worth watching just for John Glover as the devil. But also Lori Petty was in it, and she played like the cops like landlady / like girl in the chair, I guess, because she was always teaching about the internet and how to look stuff up and all that kind of stuff. And I completely forgot she was in that until I looked up her credits last night and saw that she was in that as well.
John Glover was Lionel Luthor in Smallville, correct?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, exactly,
Yeah. Okay. Oh, okay. I could totally see him being the devil. That's fun.
That was my first encounter with John Glover. Well, no. The first time I knew that it was John Glover. My first thing I ever saw him in was actually Gremlins 2, but
okay, fair.
So when he popped up in the first episode of Smallville, I'm like, John Glover. I did the DiCaprio thing.
I do that a lot watching movies because my superpower is retaining the information from every IMDb profile I've ever looked at.
Yeah,
and this
exactly.
Is only helpful on trivia night.
Yeah, my wife every now and then she tries to quiz me on stuff with like Marvel movies, and she's like, "What year did this come out with?" I'm like, "Oh, that came out in blah blah blah." She's like, "How do you know this?" I'm like, "I don't know." I can't remember my own birthday, but I can remember when Captain America: The Winter Soldier came out.
Yeah. When did it come out?
Now you're putting me on the spot. No, it was 2014.
Yes, that I believe that is correct.
So anyway, I went to so I was really excited just from hearing her voice right at the beginning. I'm just like, oh, okay. I'm because I knew Malcolm McDowell. Obviously Malcolm McDowell. So I'm like, but he's been in a bunch of stuff of questionable quality. So I wasn't sure what to expect from that. And then as soon as I heard, and I saw Naomi Watts' name in the credits, I'm like, really, Naomi Watts? Okay. And then as soon as I heard Lori Petty's voice, I'm like, okay, I'm definitely much more into this now than I was 10 minutes ago. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. It's a pretty bonkers movie. Like I think one of the biggest problems this movie has is it was released in the wrong year, in the wrong decade. I think if this movie was released like now, people would have a much more positive reception to it. Yeah,
I agree. In the episode of Sci-Fi 5 I wrote about the podcast, I wrote about the movie. I I described it as, imagine if Harley Quinn from the Birds of Prey, the 2020 Birds of Prey film, had a baby with Mad Max Fury Road, and that baby drove a tank. That's Tank Girl. Uh, and that was like the most succinct way I could think of to describe this film. And every time I say that, anybody that's seen it is like, yeah, that works.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
As soon as you went to Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn, I'm just like, yep, okay. And then you just kept on building. I'm like, yep, yeah, that's it.
Yeah. So you definitely you can see it really feels like Margot Robbie just she had to have drawn influence from this particular film. Just the aesthetics of like Tank Girl's outfits, they're all like haphazard. It seems like and this is like a post-apocalyptic type film.
Right.
So I mean, she's kind of wearing whatever's handy, which might be half of a leg warmer on her arm or whatever. And so I really got Harley Quinn vibes from her, and she's always doing something weird with her hair. Again, very Harley Quinn vibes, and she's like manic and giggly all the time. Even if she's in trouble, like she never like stops like with that like just cheesing all the time. She's always grinning, always smiling. And for me, I think like her real power is that it's like she's not afraid of anything, no matter what like dangerous situation she finds herself in. There's a point in the film where she's kidnapped by the bad guys, and she like makes fun of them the whole time, and I feel like that robs them of their power because they know that she's not afraid of them. And I love that.
Oh yeah, I mean, all of that was so much fun. I did think it was a little bit. I thought it kind of pushed the credulity for me at some of the points, like when she's going to save Sam in the brothel type place, and then she spends all this time to like play around with the outfits, and at that point I'm just like, this might not be the best time to play around with different clothing outfits.
No, I loved that because I mean that was such a in the area in which I grew up in, there was a very rigid way that you're to be if you're a man. There's a very rigid way to be if you're a woman. Um, and I loved that scene because the voiceover is telling her how she needs to dress. If you don't have your ears pierced, your ears will be pierced for you. And growing up as somebody who a girl with like a tomboyish nature, and I hated like wearing dresses. I hated having to do anything that made me wear anything other than like a jeans and a t-shirt and a baseball cap. So watching her just say, nah, I'm just going to do what I want was actually very empowering. So I love that scene, actually.
No, that's a good point. Yeah, I could definitely see how if you come from that background, that would definitely speak to you on a different level. Just from the story point of view, it felt like not the best time to be doing it. But
it definitely, I can see that point of view as well. And like many things in Tank Girl, it kind of leans on the absurd, or borders on the absurd. But I kind of love the absurd, so that worked for me.
Well, I think that's one of the things that really works for this which is why I think it came out in the wrong decade, because the 90s was the time when, especially comic book fans, were trying to escape the camp, the associations with camp, right? Because everything, we were so, I think we were kind of shell shocked by the reaction the world had to Batman 66 still in the 1990s. And it was kind of like, because I've said this before and I'll keep saying this, but like every newspaper article that had some connection to comic books back in the 90s was like, bam, biff, bam, zop, comic books aren't for kids anymore, or some ridiculously lazy shit like that. And so a lot of people that I knew and of my generation, we were just kind of like, we had almost like a visceral reaction, negative reaction to anything campy. And it's only in later years now, and like in the past, 20 years or so, that's like started to fade. And now we're just kind of looking back. No, actually, man, that stuff was kind of fun.
Yeah, I love dark gritty comics. But I also, I love the Biff Bam Pow. I grew up watching Batman 66, so ain't no shade on that. And
Yeah.
I got to meet both Adam West and Burt Ward at conventions. So I can happily say I have met both Batman and Robin. So anyway, it was I can appreciate both sides.
No, I agree. I like I said, like that was this. It was this phase that I think a lot of our generation went through, where we're just like,
Oh sure.
comic books are better than this. Comic books are more adult. They're serious. Look, we've got Watchmen. We've got Dark Knight Returns. Comic books aren't campy, and it was just like this over defensiveness that I think a lot of us had, and it's only in the past 20 years or so that I think a lot of us have loosened up a little bit and be like, actually, yeah, Batman 66 was kind of fun. It did kind of.
Yep.
And that's what this movie feels like. It feels like, if you had like Bill Dozier and you gave him like a bigger budget and a bit more progressive ideas, I think probably would have made something more like this.
Yeah. Because the humor is definitely like absurdist. It definitely leans in the Biff Bam Pow direction, but the content, there's a lot of like sexual content and bathroom humor and Tank Girl is very much perceived as like the sex symbol. She's the hot girl or whatever, and everybody's trying to get with her, and she's just kind of like laughing at them. It's like nope, and makes fun of them. So definitely kind of more edgy humor, while also maintaining the Biff Bam Pow.
Yeah, it was interesting to me about that because because in all the other stuff I'd seen with Lori Petty, because she always tends to play that more like tomboyish type character. So I'd never associated her with like the sex symbol type, and then seeing her in this movie, it was an interesting contrast because you see like obviously she's very attractive, but then you also see that mixed with like the way she's owning it in a lot of ways that you don't see.
Yeah.
And then combine it with as well like her tomboyish nature too. So it's all these weird, not weird, but all these different things that aren't the norm, especially at that time, mixing together to form something that's really unique and interesting.
Yeah, and watching Tank Girl again the other night, I realized why am I so drawn to this film and this at least Lori Petty's portrayal of her. I'm looking forward to digging into some of the comics now that I've watched the film a few times. But what I love about her portrayal, like I already mentioned, is that she kind of swoops in and she saves the day, like, and she's rescuing other women. Like she kind of fends off the guy who's harassing Jet Girl. And Jet Girl, who is played by Naomi Watts, she's very she's a little bit mousy. She's a little she's very intimidated by the situation she's in, because they're imprisoned and forced to work for this big evil company, and
she's almost resigned to it too, right?
Yeah.
There's that thing
she's
when
resigned.
Yeah, like when Becca's telling her, it's like, I'm gonna get out of here, and then Jet Girl is saying to her, it's like, you can't. There's no way out of this. It's just, you just have to kind of accept it. And and Becca doesn't.
Yeah, no, she doesn't at all. And so she kind of swoops in and she kind of takes Jet Girl under her wing, and is almost like this big sister type character to her. And then she does the same thing for Sam, who they they have to go rescue. That's like kind of the climax of the film is trying to rescue Sam, not only from the brothel, and then she and for context, if you've not seen the film, Sam is like a 10-year-old girl, so she's very young, and Rebecca, Tank Girl's looking out for her, and so I really like that's it, because I am the oldest in my family. I'm the oldest kid, and I always wanted like an older sibling. For most of the time I wanted an older brother because I was tomboyish and I felt like I would like get along with a brother more than I did my sister. But I wanted to have like that big brother, that big sister kind of character or that kind of person in my life. And watching Tank Girl, like it was like it was hitting that part of my my emotional needs, for want of better terminology. I was like, oh wow, this is why I love this character, is because she swoops in. She's like the big sister that you always wanted. She helps you to be brave because she's not afraid of anything, and she, and her true power lies in just um, mocking the um, the bad guys. I there's this quote from Martin Luther where it says, if the devil is bothering you and you can't fight him away with scripture or prayer or whatever, jeer and flout him because he cannot bear scorn. This is the quote from that C.S. Lewis used at the beginning of the Screw Tape Letters, so that's why I remember it. But I'm like, oh yeah, but that's literally what she does. Like anybody who's the bad guy or is getting in the way, that she just makes fun of them the whole time, and I love that about her. So yeah.
Okay. So yeah, one of the things too that I thought was interesting about this was the fact that it's directed by a woman, which is something even today you don't see a lot of. And so I didn't realize that when I started watching it. And then when I got to the director's name, I'm like, oh, cool, it's directed by a woman. And then when we see the scene when we're introduced to Rebecca and her boyfriend, and it's like they completely invert the idea of the male gaze, and here we're focusing the camera in on him as he's stripping. I'm like,
right.
Oh wow! It reminded me of comparing how Wonder Woman, like how Patty Jenkins shot Gal Gadot in Wonder Woman versus then how she was shot in Justice League, and just seeing and that was the first time when I realized, crystal clear. I'm like, oh, I totally get what they talk about when they talk about the male gaze now.
Yes.
And
yes.
that really drove it home in that scene too when I saw it. And I'm like this movie did it even before Wonder Woman did.
Yeah, absolutely. Rebecca Tulule, I think is how you say her name. But she's actually directed some Doctor Who and a bunch of other things. So her directorial catalog is definitely worth checking out. So.
Oh my God, she directed Freddy's Dead.
Yes. So
Wow.
one of the things I cover in the Sci-Fi 5 podcast, I give you like a kind of like a historical rundown of like how did this film get made. And so when she was directing Freddy's Dead, that was her directorial debut. Her daughter or stepdaughter, I don't remember which, somebody had given her a Tank Girl comic to read while she was on set. And she read it and she's like, wow, this is great. I love this. I need to get the film rights to this because I want to do this movie. And so she shopped the film around to a bunch of different studios, actually got an offer to do it from Disney, but she declined it because she was afraid Disney would not let her make the Tank Girl, like a true to comic Tank Girl film.
Right.
And so the film did eventually get picked up. I think Universal did it, or Paramount, one of the two. I don't remember which. But the studio that did pick it up, I mean, unfortunately, she feels like part of the reason there was mixed reception on the film is that the studio got pretty ham-handed with how certain things were shot, and they made her cut a bunch of things that she wanted to keep in. So she didn't by the end product, she didn't really feel like it was her movie anymore, which is that is very frustrating from a creative point of view.
Well, yeah.
So,
so it looks like it was MGM.
MGM. Thank you.
Yeah. And here's one of the things in the trivia on IMDb that says that insisted in cutting a scene of Tank Girl and Booga reclining after sex, after they'd spent $5,000 on a prosthetic penis for him.
Yes. Yeah. So, studio's like, nah, nobody's gonna do that. So, definitely a lot of studio interference with that, which is, unfortunate.
There was also apparently a scene of them together in bed in the theatrical cut, but it was cut from the video and DVD releases.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Where I watched it on streaming, I mean, you kind of see them like reclining together. they're semi-clothed, so I
Yeah,
I
yeah.
assumed they've been busy. So uh, so I that's what I assumed it was. So I, having not seen the theatrical, or having not seen it in theaters, I don't know if I saw the theatrical cut or whatever was released for home video. So
Hmm.
um yeah, so anyway, so a lot of studio interference with the film, which the director believes hampered the film's success.
Yeah.
um,
In fact, this is yeah, Jamie Hewlett, who's one of the co-creators. He had
mhm.
talked about some of this too, and it was mostly cut after the test screenings. So
Mm,
Subgirl got cut to just one scene, even though she
right,
was originally supposed to be an integral part of the film.
right,
And
and
then
played by Ann Cusack as well. So
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
And Hewlett said that the very last shot had Tank Girl burping into the camera, and he had said that it's ridiculous having a bunch of snotty little 14-year-olds deciding how a film should be made. They were probably just
Hmm.
snogging their bird or pulling each other's hair throughout the whole thing. He also revealed that a scene. Oh, and then also the high tech prosthetic cock. And he said the whole scene
Hmm.
was very romantic, but MGM took it out. Too bestial. We were going. It's innocent, like seeing your mom and dad in bed together. MGM disagreed.
Yeah.
And
Well.
also, Steven Spielberg was asked to produce it, and he declined because he felt he wasn't hip enough for it. And this led to the tagline, "Too hip for Spielberg."
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That's a fun tagline. Too hip for
Hmm.
Spielberg. I love it. I love it. Yeah, and one of the other fun points of trivia is three Spice Girls auditioned for the role of Tank Girl.
Yeah.
Posh, baby, and sexy. So,
Hmm.
yep. So could have had a Spice Girl, but instead we got Lori Petty.
And
And Lori Petty. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, Courtney. This may have been what you were about to say, but Courtney Love was
Hmm.
also offered the role of Jet Girl.
Hmm.
But this happened. This filming started around the time that Kurt Cobain committed suicide. So then she pulled out
Right.
because of that. Although she did work as the music supervisor on it.
Yes. Yes. So if you like the soundtrack, thank Courtney Love. So
Mm.
there you go. Yeah, and Hole has a song on the soundtrack. The whole soundtrack is great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really like a good time capsule of mid '90s angsty alt rock.
Mhm.
I really really dug it. Good stuff. Good stuff there.
It's a really fun soundtrack. Yeah, like there wasn't anything that I particularly clued into as far as like, oh, I remember that song, but it definitely works for the film's benefit.
Yeah,
And
for sure, for sure. Very thematic.
yeah, and let's talk a little bit about Malcolm McDowell. What do you think of how he played the character?
Oh, he was great. Like just this crazy mustache twirling psycho villain. A lot of fun to watch. I have not seen Malcolm McDowell's most famous work, Clockwork Orange, mostly because from what I've read about it, makes me think, ooh, that's gonna like kind of push my boundaries a little too much.
It,
Probably
it's
not, probably not emotionally prepared to watch that.
Yeah, it's not an easy movie to watch. I mean, it is a very good movie, but
Right.
it's tough. It's kind of like maybe not quite as extreme as, but Requiem for a Dream has that kind of feel to it too, where it's like I
Mm,
watched
hmm.
that a few
Hmm.
times. I own it even, but I'm not sure if I'm ever gonna watch it willingly again unless someone wants to see it.
Yeah, no, I get that. I get that. Um, yeah, so I mean, I've seen him in lots of other things. Star Trek. Um, the I'm blank. Sorry, it just left my brain. What is the other thing that he is
Well, I mean, something that
well
I
known
because
for?
I'm not sure how well known this is, but I picked up I got the Heroes TV show, and he was the villain in the first.
Mm,
Well, not the villain, I guess one of the antagonists in the first season. Um,
hmm.
so that was one thing that stuck out to me in my memory. But also another Superman connection. He did the voice of Metallo on Superman the Animated Series.
Oh, cool. Okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, it's funny. The other things I know him for are kind of random. He was Grandpa Reg in Phineas and Ferb. I don't know if you ever watched the Disney cartoon Phineas and Ferb, but much better than it's given credit for among
Mhm.
adults. Really good stuff there. Um, and oh shoot, what was the other one?
I'm not sure, but while
Um,
you're looking that up, one
yeah.
thing too about because Ice T's in this too. He plays
Yes.
one of the Rippers, and he was on a hip hop show and the host was making fun of him for doing Tank Girl. And Ice-T's response was like, "Hey, I was paid $800,000 for that movie," and then the host moved on after that.
Yeah, yeah. Yes, I remember that. Cat People. That was the one I was thinking of. 1980s horror film,
Oh, okay.
which yeah, which is definitely like ugh, great. Like it leaned into the oh, that's kind of gross. I don't want to watch that again.
Well, that's why I said it's
But
kind of
yeah,
funny that I love Malcolm McDowell, but when I saw his name in it, it didn't inspire confidence because he's been in a lot of stuff of questionable content over the years.
yeah. I mean, the man's certainly not afraid to push boundaries,
No.
and Tank Girl, it was definitely a film that pushed boundaries for the time, for sure. Yeah, but no,
Uh,
I liked him as this villain who's kind of sinister and um, you know a little bit mustache twirly, but also still pretty intimidating. I thought he was good.
I love scenery chewing villain. So like I was thinking
Hmm.
one of our recent episodes, we did the 2017 Power Rangers, and one of my
Mm-hmm.
favorite things in that was Elizabeth Banks, and just like how she's just there is not an ounce of that scenery in that movie that she does not have her teeth marks in,
Oh,
and
that's awesome. I missed that one in the theater. I still haven't gotten to watch it, but I saw that it's available on Tubi right now here in the States. So
it's like it's
definitely gonna watch that.
yeah, it's a mixed movie. I'm gonna quote. This isn't the guy who came on to talk about it, but my buddy Mark Boskett, he had written a review on Letterboxd, and what he said of it was his review opens up with the line, "Zack Snyder's Breakfast Club is a very odd movie," and that's exactly what he feels.
I love that. Well, I as soon as I heard that she was going to be Rita Repulsa, and at that point my main familiarity with her was Effie Trinket in the Hunger Games. I was like, oh
Mhm.
heck yeah, I'm gonna watch that. That's gonna be fun. And even being a big Power Rangers fan back in the day, so
She takes
like
that performance and she knocks it up to like several several
I
degrees.
love it because
It's
OG
great.
Rita Repulsa was pretty over the top
Mhm.
anyway. So I'm I whenever
She
I get out of a
she
meeting or something I don't want to do, I like after 10,000 years I'm free.
she's the easily the best part of the movie, and because she just she got the
Awesome.
assignment, she understood what she was supposed to be doing.
I
The
love
rest of
it.
the
I
movie,
love it.
including the director, not so much, but she understood. And
Okay, very good.
I get the same kind of vibe from Malcolm McDowell in this, like that first scene when he's in there and he's telling the guy he's smashing all the screens and he's telling him to walk across broken glass, and then he uses this bizarre because one of the things that's going on in this movie is water is at a premium because of you know post-apocalyptic world.
Comet
Yeah,
hit
comet
the
hit the
Earth. Yeah, this takes place in 2033.
33. Yeah,
Yeah, so as of last year, a comet hit the Earth and basically wiped out all the water on the planet.
yeah,
And so getting hydrated is tough.
yeah. And I'm not sure how well the science on that works out,
Yeah,
but
yeah, I kept having questions, but just roll with it. It's fine.
yeah, I mean, because water scarcity, I mean, like, I don't think you really need to reach for a comet striking the Earth to pull that up,
Yeah,
but anyway, they do it, and one of the things that is so this water scarcity, and so his company develops this machine that sucks the blood out of people and converts it into water. And so there's this
yeah,
henchman where he kills him and he's by stabbing him with this machine drains all his blood out. You see the guy's skin shriveling up, and then it converts all this blood into pure water and just takes a drink from it. It's just,
yeah,
it's perfect. It's perfect.
yeah, yeah. Fun times.
And Naomi Watts was pretty impressive in this too. Like I reckon I as soon as I saw her name, I was keeping an eye out for her. And at first, I'm just like, no, she's not the little girl, is she? She can't. She's not that much young for when this movie came out. And then when she pops up as Jet Girl, I'm like, oh, okay, now I know who she is.
Yeah. Jet Girl, I think, is my favorite character in this.
Mhm.
Like, I just like, oh, buddy, I get you. And so I'm a somewhat casual cosplayer. I don't sew or anything like that. I have friends who are much more talented than me that help me with such things. But Jet Girl definitely made my cosplay list after this movie. I'm like, oh,
Mhm.
I love Jet Girl. She's so cool. I want to, yeah, especially when she kind of later in the film, like kind of comes into her own power, and especially in the scene where they're in the the chopper or the
Mhm.
plane, and they're trying to sneak past enemy lines for whatever reason, and she just gets on the radio and yells at the person who's trying to clear them for landing, and just lets them have it, and they're like, oh, okay, yeah, you can do it. And I'm like, oh, that was great. And
Well, also the
you know,
the scene with the guy that was harassing her in the prison, he gets his comeuppance when he's
absolutely.
and when he's like, oh fuck me, and she's like, how many times do I have to tell you no?
Yes, exactly. No, I loved that. That was so good, so good. Very, very. Like I said, as a lady, this was a very empowering film.
Mhm.
I've read that, and I haven't heard it straight from the horse's mouth, so I don't know. But I've read that Naomi Watts is kind of embarrassed about this film, but I don't think she has anything to be embarrassed about at all.
No, I mean,
Yeah,
even
it's
look,
weird. It's not her usual thing, but come on, it's great.
I mean, even still, even if you're going to judge this movie too harshly on its critical merits, like even based on that scale, she still does a great job. Like,
Yeah,
she's still
no,
one of the standout
she's good.
performances in this movie. Yeah.
And Naomi Watts certainly has a history of weird things in
Mhm.
her resume. I mean, my introduction to Naomi Watts was in The Ring in 2002,
For me, it
which
was
scared the.
Mulholland Drive, which is
Oh, okay, yeah.
yeah,
Which, I mean, that's David Lynch, isn't it?
that's David Lynch. Yeah, that is
Yeah, yeah. And so I recently just finished Twin Peaks: The Return, and she was in that. And it's like, so girl likes herself some weird stuff. So
mhm.
Naomi Watts, if you're listening, please don't be ashamed of this movie.
Yeah, yeah.
I want to, if you ever show up at a con, I want to talk to you about Tank Girl. I
And if
hope
by
it
some
doesn't
reason
bother
you are listening to this, send an email and we'll have you on the show, because that would be amazing.
Yes, 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 please.
Um, but yeah, she did a great job, and also, the scene when they confront the madam, and just to show you like how wacky it is, that when they've got her nailed down, they got her basically dead to rights, and Tank Girl's idea for what she should do. She's like, what do you want me to do? She makes them sing let's do it at gunpoint.
Yeah.
And it turns into this. And this is one of the times, because like I said, I was watching this late at night. I dozed off at a few points, and this is one of those points I'm just like, did I dream that? Like,
Yeah, and apparently that scene was a much longer in the original cut of the film, and they made them trim it back. I was like, that was great. It was so silly and weird, and I loved
mhm.
it. But yes, let's do it. Cole Porter, 1938. Yep, great song.
Also, James Hong popping up as Chet Sai, the cybernetics doctor, was a
Yes,
nice little cameo there.
Shredder. Or for a more modern audience, he was Grandpa in Everything Everywhere All at Once. So.
I still haven't seen that. I still got to see that.
Oh, bro, best movie of the
I
year
know,
last
I know.
year.
It came out. It only just recently came out in the theaters here, so I have been able to,
go,
and so I have been
definitely
able to
worth
get to see it in the theater.
definitely worth a theater experience. I know. I remember you saying on a previous episode that in Japan people don't emote in the theater, but
Mm.
I have not laughed that hard or cried that much in a movie like ever. So yeah, just brace yourself.
Yeah, I think I might have to wait until it comes out on DVD here, unfortunately. But
I will say, even if you have to brace yourself, watch it in the
mm.
theater if you can. It's definitely worth a theatrical experience. So good
And
sound editing on that one.
also talking about the feminist themes in here. Oh, plus when you're talking about Rachel Talalay, I was looking up some of her other credits. She's got a lot of comic book stuff under her name. Like, she's directed episodes of The Flash, Legends of Tomorrow, Superman and Lois, Doom Patrol. It's not a comic book, but American Gods, created by a comic book writer. Supergirl,
Yeah.
Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, Iron Fist. Yeah, she's just done a ton of comic book stuff.
Yeah. Really, really great genre work under her belt for sure.
And talking about the feminist themes in here, because this has been it's gotten a lot of second looks because of the feminist themes in it. Like, this is some of the academic stuff in it. So in the 1997 book Trash Aesthetics, Deborah Cartmel states that while the comic showed her to be unheroic or even accidental antihero, the film sets her up with this Western generic kind of ideas, like the classic Western hero, and calls her a post-feminist icon, where she displays dominant female sexuality and knowing coolness of outlawed modes of sexuality like masturbation, sadomasochism, and lesbianism. Um, and unlike a lot of other comic book adaptation films, this is in The Modern Amazons. They say that it stands out as being stridently feminist. And then in a 2011 book called Cult Cinema, they talk about they compare it to cult films that are said to be feminist and whether or not they really are feminist, or just the effect of the performance of feminist attitudes. And so they said that Tank Girl is a real feminist cult film, as opposed to stuff from like Catherine Bigelow and Catherine Hardwicke, which they say are too masculine and too eager to cater to heteronormativity.
Yeah, yeah.
So just some interesting.
Definitely. Yeah, so go ahead.
I was just gonna say those are some interesting things that jumped out at me when I was doing some research for this.
Yeah, yeah. It's definitely very unique for its time. As you said, I think it would be much better received if it was released, today. Even like 10 years later, I think the film would have done a lot better. But definitely now, I mean, the film is almost 30 years old, so now it definitely would have been much better received for sure. But I'm glad it's out there. I'm glad it exists. It's definitely worth a second look if you've seen it before and you were like, wow, that was weird. But yeah, so, and definitely some points of it are like, wow, that was kind of a fever dream. Like, the whole let's do it dance number. But it's a good romp for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I would like to see it. So you were talking about the Birds of Prey, because Megan Carpentier said that it had a strong influence on the aesthetics of Birds of Prey, and
that's not surprising at all.
Yeah. And you know what? I would like to see like a director's cut of this, because it sounds like there was a lot of stuff left on the cutting room floor, and I wonder if that would be a possibility to see what this could have been.
Yeah, about 10 years ago, here in the States, Shout Factory did a really cool Blu-ray release, which is tragically out of print. And if you want to get it now, you're going to drop anywhere from like $140 to $200 on the secondary market to get it. But it had director commentary from Rachel Talulah and Lori Petty, which was really cool. And I forget what else was on there. The main reason to get that film on that Blu-ray, if you can, would be for the director commentary and the commentary by Lori Petty. So, yeah, it's definitely worth checking out if you can find it.
Also, well, this might be some hope for it, because apparently Margot Robbie's production company has optioned the rights to a remake of it. So
yes, yeah, and she did that in 2019. So and then COVID happened. So I don't know if we're gonna see it happen at any point in the near future, but the rights have been optioned, so it is a quite literal option at some point in the future. I do hope they give it another shot, and I would love. I mean, Margot Robbie to me is the kind of the ideal casting choice for that, because I mean, again, it's very clear that her Harley Quinn portrayal is influenced by Tank Girl for sure.
Yeah.
So for me, she's kind of the ideal choice. I don't know who else I would pick to play Tank Girl, but
I agree. Yeah, I think she would be perfect. Yeah. But I'd also say that I hope if that does come out, maybe we could get a new release, possibly even a director's cut.
I hope so. Yeah.
I mean, but even still, like there's a lot to like about this movie. I wasn't sure what to expect, because it doesn't have the best popular reception, and like you said, opinion is very divided on it. So, but again, once I turned it on, and as soon as I heard Lori Petty's voice, I'm just like, oh, okay, I think I'm in good hands here, and I turned out to be right.
Yeah. No, it's definitely a good time, especially if you're a fan of cult cinema. You like movies with strong feminist themes or or strong female characters. I honestly, I even hesitate to use the word strong female characters because I feel like that phrase is so overused it doesn't mean anything anymore.
Mhm.
But if you like women who are strong in their own power, then yeah, Tank Girl is a good film for you to check out. Also, this, as we mentioned, we already talked about Naomi Watts quite a bit and how much I love her portrayal of Jet Girl, and this film is kind of almost like a who's who of uh, genre actors who weren't quite as prominent then, but you know them now. The
Mhm.
main one for me that as soon as I saw, I was like, there he is. It's Doug Jones, who
Yeah, yeah.
brilliant character actor, probably known a little better these days for being the creature in The Shape of Water. Got an Oscar for that, and rightfully so. Um,
Also,
the
Abe Sapien in Del Toro's Hellboy movies, and
right.
the Silver Surfer in Rise of the Silver Surfer.
Yeah, and these days he spends his time being Mr. Saru on Star Trek Discovery,
Oh, okay.
and I got to meet Doug Jones very briefly in 2015 at a con. Incredibly kind human. Love him to bits. Very, very sweet man. Just is very generous with his time and is a good hugger. If you like hugs, you got to meet Doug Jones. He's just a very sweet guy. But uh just he's always he's like this very dapper, very like well put together guy, and every time I see him on screen he is a critter,
Mhm.
or a monster or an alien, or like in Crimson Peak he was like a ghost woman in the bathtub. So he's always playing some kind of character, but he is a positively brilliant character actor, and he's the Ripper in he's wearing like the bow tie
Mhm.
and the suspenders. But as
Right,
soon as,
right.
I like, once you know what Doug Jones actually looks like, he's actually pretty easy to spot. But yeah, he was. He doesn't have any lines, but I'm like, oh, there's my man Doug. He's cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd seen his name pop up in the IMDb credits before I watched this, and then
Hmm.
I'd said to myself when I saw it, I'm like, oh, I got to keep an eye out for him, and it just completely skipped my mind when I actually sat down and watched it.
Hmm. Yep.
Anyway, any other final thoughts you wanted to mention about Tank Girl?
Uh, I don't think so. Just if you're still not sure about Tank Girl, you hear me. I wrote about it in depth. As much as in depth as you can get in 5 minutes for the Sci-Fi 5 podcast. So give that a listen if you're still not sure. But I stand by my description. It's uh, Harley Quinn from Birds of Prey 2020 meets Mad Max Fury Road, and that particular baby those two movies had, she drives a tank. So
Yeah.
it's a good time.
Well, that was something else I found really surprising about this is just how much story they cram into us. Like the plot
Mm.
does not stop. There's like not a
Hmm.
moment of wasted space in this. It moves from like so. Calling it Tank Girl is pretty apt because it's constantly moving from one thing to the next, and it like I was kind of surprised. We go from in the beginning, we go from so we see her in this commune that she's living in, and then they get attacked by the WP folks, and then she ends up getting captured. She ends up breaking out. She ends up going and finding the tank and all that, and that's like only the first like 40 minutes.
Right. Yeah. Action definitely does not stop.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I was. Thank you for suggesting this. It was definitely fun to watch. Movies like this can be a mixed bag when someone says like, "Oh, I want to watch this," obscure cult movie. Sometimes it's, yeah, it was a lot of fun. Other times it's just like, ooh, that was not good. This was definitely the former over the latter. Like I really got
Oh,
a
well,
kick out
good.
of it.
I'm glad. Yeah, I suggested it. I was like, oh man, I hope he doesn't think it's trash. Because I had a really good time with it, and if he does think it's trash, well, we're gonna have a really interesting discussion,
Yeah.
debating its merits.
Okay, but in the meantime, why don't you tell people where they can find you?
Sure, yeah. If you want to follow me on social media, you can hit me up on the tweets, at least until it implodes, at
Mm.
the Nerdy Blogger. You can like my Facebook page, facebook.com/the Nerdy Blogger. You can read my words on my blog, nerdingblogging.wordpress.com. You can also read my words on fangirlish.com, where I write about film and television. Right now, mostly Star Trek, but I do the occasional film review. I definitely have written a good bit about horror and comics and things like that. So definitely worth checking out my work there. You can also hear my words being read on the Sci-Fi 5 podcast, which is 5 minutes of science fiction history, 5 days a week. And you can also hear me on the podcast 616, as I mentioned, which is my Marvel podcast that I co-host with Hugh McStay. And you can also hear me on We Are Starfleet, which is a Star Trek podcast, all on the We Made This podcast network.
Awesome. Yeah. And we'll have links to all that stuff in the show notes. So please make sure to check those out. Also, our website, superherocinephiles.com, Super Cinema Pod on Twitter and Instagram. Also, if you subscribe to our Patreon for as little as $1 a month, you get these episodes a week in advance, no ads, and you also get access to the Superhero Cinephiles Book Club, where about once a month or so we talk about comic books and graphic novels. I'm not sure where it's going to fall in the schedule, but Ashley is going to be on at some point in the near future. We're recording next week. I don't know when it's going to come out, but her and I are going to be talking about the Charles Soule and Javier Pulido She-Hulk series from a few years ago. So keep your ears out for that. It'll be a lot of fun. Looking forward to it. And that does it for now. Thank you so much for listening. We'll talk to you next time. If you enjoy the Superhero Cinephiles, then you'll also love my companion podcast, the Superhero Cinephiles Book Club. All my Patreon subscribers get access to this exclusive podcast where I review superhero comics and graphic novels. Not sure what comics you want to read next or what you should dive into? I've got you covered on that. I'll be doing reviews, recommendations, and also talking to you about useful entry points if you're interested in reading some comics but don't know where you should start. Plus, you'll get access to all episodes of the main show a week before everyone else. On all of this for as little as just $1 a month. All you have to do is go to patreon.com/supercinemapod and you can sign up at any subscription amount to get started. Thanks so much for your support, and please don't forget to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts.
Thank you for listening. And as always, good night, good evening. God bless.